Inheriting my childhood home from my parents was meant to be a bittersweet experience, imbued with nostalgia and memories that shaped my early life. The house, nestled in a quaint neighborhood with tree-lined streets, held echoes of laughter, family gatherings, and the warmth of shared moments. It was more than mere bricks and mortar. It was a sanctuary filled with remnants of love and the legacy of my parents' hard work. As I stepped through the door for the first time after their passing, I could almost hear their voices guiding me. The walls were adorned with photographs capturing milestones, from birthday celebrations to quiet Sunday afternoons spent on the porch. Each room whispered stories of joy and sometimes sorrow, creating an emotional tapestry that tethered me to my past. However, this emotional haven soon became a battleground when Karen entered the scene. A neighbor and member of the local homeowners association, she had always been vocal about her opinions on property matters, but never before had she taken such an aggressive stance. Her claims regarding ownership were shocking, asserting not only that I didn't own the house but that it fell under HOA jurisdiction. This unexpected twist rattled my sense of belonging and exacerbated my grief over losing my parents. Suddenly, what should have been a simple transition turned into a fight for both my home and the cherished memories buried within its walls, a fight complicated by Karen's relentless pursuit of control. Karen had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade, her presence both familiar and often contentious. A self-appointed gatekeeper of community standards, she had a reputation for being vocal about the rules set by the homeowners association. Clad in her signature pastel blazers, she would often attend HOA meetings with an air of authority, passionately advocating for what she believed to be the best interests of the community. While her intentions might have seemed noble to some, many residents viewed her as intrusive, especially when it came to property matters. My interactions with Karen had always been cordial, mostly small talk during neighborhood gatherings or brief exchanges at the mailbox. However, I never realized how deeply her need for control extended. When she began asserting that my inherited home was actually claimed by the HOA, it felt like a slap in the face. From her perspective, Karen believed that the property was part of a broader narrative, one where homeowners were simply stewards of shared spaces, rather than true owners in the traditional sense. Motivated by a mix of ambition and community ideals, Karen positioned herself as an advocate for property rights within the HOA framework. Yet her claims were not just about land, they seemed to stem from an overarching desire for influence. As I navigated through this unexpected challenge, it became clear that Karen was determined to rewrite the narrative surrounding my family home, turning my emotional refuge into collateral in her power play. The first time Karen confronted me about the house, it was on my front lawn, her tone both assertive and condescending. Without hesitation, she claimed that the property was under the jurisdiction of the homeowners association, insisting that it was never really mine to inherit. "You may have the deed," she said with a pointed finger, "but the HOA has the final say on everything in this neighborhood, including ownership." She produced what she described as evidence gathered from the HOA's bylaws, flipping through a printed copy of an extensive document. According to her interpretation, every homeowner essentially leased their property from the HOA, and any changes in ownership, including inheritances, had to be approved by them. Karen cited clauses regarding property modifications that supposedly reinforced this claim, declaring that my parents had fallen short on compliance during their ownership. With enthusiasm reminiscent of a courtroom scene, she insisted that my parents had agreed to these terms upon purchase. "You must understand," she continued, "this is about maintaining community standards." As I listened, disbelief washed over me. The emotional weight of my inheritance collided with her legal jargon. Not only was she challenging my ownership, she was claiming that I was part of a much larger narrative governed by her interpretation of community rules, a narrative that could erase the very essence of my family's legacy. Homeowners associations, HOAs, are organizations established to manage and maintain the common areas of residential communities, ensuring that the neighborhood adheres to certain standards. Typically, they operate under a set of bylaws that outline the rules and regulations homeowners must follow, aiming to preserve property values and enhance communal living. Members of the HOA pay dues, which fund maintenance, landscaping, and other shared amenities like pools or parks. However, misconceptions about HOAs often arise, especially concerning ownership rights. Many people mistakenly believe that by purchasing a home in an HOA-managed community, they relinquish some degree of ownership. In reality, while HOAs have authority over community regulations, like exterior modifications or landscaping, they do not own individual properties. Homeowners retain full ownership rights but must comply with the established rules to maintain harmony within the community. Karen's claims leveraged this confusion, suggesting that my parents' failure to adhere to HOA standards somehow invalidated our ownership. It's crucial to understand that while HOAs can enforce compliance through fines or restrictions, they cannot outright claim ownership of a property. This misunderstanding often leads to contentious disputes, as seen in my situation, where community governance collides with individual rights. Navigating these dynamics can be challenging, particularly when a neighbor chooses to interpret the rules in ways that serve their interests rather than uphold the community's integrity. Understanding these nuances is vital for any homeowner facing similar challenges. The history of my childhood home stretches back to the late 1980s when my parents purchased it as a newly built property, eager to establish roots in a growing community. Their decision was driven not only by the charm of the house but also by the promise of a safe neighborhood for me to grow up in. Over the years, they turned the house into a warm family sanctuary, filling it with love and laughter. One of the most significant renovations occurred shortly after my sister was born. My parents transformed the attic into a cozy playroom where countless hours were spent building forts and playing games. They also landscaped the backyard, creating a vibrant garden that became my mother's pride and joy, complete with colorful flowers and a small vegetable patch. The home was not just a space, it embodied our family's milestones, from birthday parties to holiday gatherings. Ownership of the property remained stable until I inherited it after my parents' passing. There had been no other owners, it had always been in our family, making its significance even more profound. However, as I grappled with my grief and memories, Karen's claims intertwined with this history in unsettling ways, threatening to rewrite the narrative of what this home meant to me. The thought that someone could dismiss decades of love and effort in favor of administrative technicalities was both infuriating and disheartening. Each argument felt like an attack on not just property lines but on my family's legacy itself. The legal landscape surrounding my inherited home was complex and fraught with potential pitfalls, particularly as Karen's claims began to intertwine with both property rights and local laws. Inheritance laws clearly stipulated that the house was rightfully mine, as it had been bequeathed to me directly through my parents' will. This legal documentation affirmed my ownership and included all rights associated with it, including the ability to make decisions regarding the property without interference from outsiders. However, the presence of the Homeowners Association introduced another layer of complexity. While the HOA had established rules designed to maintain order and aesthetics within the community, these regulations could not supersede ownership rights conferred by inheritance. I sought to understand the nuances of those rules, particularly around property modifications or compliance issues that Karen claimed were pertinent to her argument. Additionally, I learned that homeowners within an HOA typically agreed to abide by its rules upon purchase, but these agreements did not grant the HOA ownership over individual properties. Karen's insistence that my parents had somehow defaulted on their obligations seemed rooted in a misunderstanding of the law. The challenge was not only legal but emotional. Navigating this dispute meant reconciling my grief and anger with the reality that I had to stand firm against claims based on misinterpretations of community governance. It became essential to gather evidence and consult legal advice to protect my family's legacy while ensuring my rights as a property owner remained intact. Initially, I felt a wave of confusion wash over me in response to Karen's claims. How could someone so close, someone I considered a neighbor, suddenly challenge my ownership of the home that had been the center of my childhood? Anger quickly followed, igniting a fierce determination to defend what was rightfully mine. My parents had worked tirelessly for that house, pouring love, sweat, and countless dreams into its walls, and I was not about to let someone undermine that legacy. Determined and fueled by a mix of grief and righteousness, I took action. The first step was educating myself about both inheritance laws and HOA regulations. I spent hours researching, poring over legal documents and guidelines to arm myself with knowledge. It became clear that while the HOA had rules for the community, they could not take away my ownership rights. Next, I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. The conversation provided me with both reassurance and clarity. My ownership was secure as long as I fought for it. I also documented everything related to Karen's claims and gathered any evidence that would support my position. But it wasn't just about legalities. Each time I stood in the yard or sifted through memories in the house, I felt an emotional surge, a commitment to my family's history. This house was more than an asset, it was a testament to my parents' love. Fueled by nostalgia and purpose, I resolved that I would not back down. I would fight for my home and the integrity of my family's legacy against any challengers. As I prepared to defend my claim to the house, gathering evidence became a crucial step in solidifying my position against Karen's assertions. I started by locating the original deed to the property, which detailed my parents' purchase and unequivocally established their ownership rights. This document was essential, as it clearly showed that the house had been passed down to me through inheritance, thus supporting my case. Next, I turned my attention to my parents' will. Within its pages, there was a specific clause outlining the inheritance of the house, making it clear that it was intended for me. This legal backing served as a powerful testament to my ownership and further refuted any claims Karen made regarding HOA jurisdiction. Additionally, I began to compile a record of past communications with the HOA. This included letters confirming my parents' compliance with neighborhood standards and maintenance of the property over the years. I also collected minutes from HOA meetings where community members had discussed various regulations, ensuring I had a comprehensive understanding of their authority and limitations. Finally, I documented my interactions with Karen, noting her claims along with the dates and circumstances surrounding our conversations. These records would prove valuable in demonstrating her attempts to undermine my ownership and could serve as evidence of her misinterpretations of HOA policies. With this collection of documents in hand, I felt more empowered to confront Karen's assertions head-on, ready to protect not just my home but the cherished memories tied to it. In an effort to resolve the escalating conflict with Karen, I decided to approach her directly in hopes of finding common ground. I invited her for a coffee at a local cafe, aiming for a calm discussion about our differing views on the house and the HOA's role. To my disappointment, the conversation quickly spiraled into tension. Karen reiterated her claims with unwavering confidence, insisting that my parents had violated HOA rules and that I was merely a caretaker of the property rather than its rightful owner. Her dismissive attitude made it clear that she was not open to negotiation. Realizing that direct dialogue was unproductive, I explored mediation options through the HOA itself. The association had a process for addressing disputes among members, so I submitted a request for mediation, hoping to bring both parties together in a structured setting. During the mediation meeting, I presented my evidence while Karen continued to assert her interpretation of the rules. However, as we discussed the matter in front of an HOA representative, it became evident that many of her claims were unfounded. The mediator attempted to de-escalate tensions by emphasizing the importance of collaboration within the community. Despite this effort, Karen remained resolute in her stance, and I found myself frustrated but determined. Although mediation did not yield an immediate resolution, it clarified to both parties that my ownership was legitimate and provided me with further support from other community members who witnessed the proceedings. This experience reinforced my resolve to protect my family's legacy and prompted me to prepare for potential next steps in this ongoing battle. As the conflict between Karen and me unfolded, the reactions from neighbors and friends varied widely, reflecting a mix of support and skepticism. Many within the community rallied behind me, recognizing the significance of my family's legacy and expressing disbelief at Karen's claims. Several longtime residents openly voiced their discontent with Karen's authoritative demeanor, recalling previous instances where she had overstepped her bounds. "That's not how this community should function," one neighbor remarked during a casual gathering, echoing sentiments shared by others who had also felt the weight of her watchful eye. Conversely, there were those who sided with Karen, believing that her dedication to overseeing community standards had merit. They viewed her as a necessary figure ensuring everyone adhered to the HOA rules. Some argued that my parents' alleged non-compliance warranted scrutiny, and they encouraged a more measured approach to the situation. This division among neighbors made me feel both supported and isolated. While I appreciated the encouragement from friends who understood my perspective, hearing Karen's supporters question my ownership added layers of doubt and frustration. I found solace in the conversations with understanding neighbors who remembered my parents fondly and acknowledged the house's deeper significance beyond mere property lines. Encouraged by their support, I grew more determined to address the situation head-on. Their willingness to stand with me not only fortified my resolve but also highlighted the importance of community solidarity in navigating these complex disputes, reminding me that I was not alone in this fight for my family's home. The day of the HOA meeting arrived with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. As I entered the community center, the atmosphere buzzed with a collection of familiar faces, some supportive friends, and others who had sided with Karen. The members of the HOA, a diverse group of residents elected to oversee the neighborhood's regulations, were seated in a semicircle, ready to hear both sides of the dispute. Karen presented her case first, confidently outlining her claims that my inherited home fell under the HOA's jurisdiction. She brandished her copy of the bylaws and made sweeping assertions about my parents' supposed non-compliance, invoking rules that many members had heard before. Her voice trembled slightly as she recounted instances where she believed my family had strayed from community standards. When it was my turn, I stood firmly, armed with the evidence I had meticulously gathered. I introduced the original deed and excerpts from my parents' will while calmly articulating my rights as an owner. I explained how the HOA's regulatory powers didn't extend to overriding individual property ownership. Key moments arose when I referenced past communications with the HOA that confirmed my parents' adherence to neighborhood standards, illustrating how Karen's interpretations lacked foundation. As I spoke, some audience members nodded in agreement, while Karen shot me frustrated glances. Tensions rose again when Karen attempted to interrupt me. However, the HOA chair intervened, emphasizing respect for all perspectives. This moment marked a shift in the dynamics. My argument resonated, not only clarifying my ownership but also reminding attendees of their own stories about community spirit, reinforcing the idea that understanding and collaboration should take precedence over disputes. In the aftermath of the HOA meeting, it became clear that both Karen and I had much at stake, prompting several attempts at resolution through compromise. Understanding that her relentless stance was driven by a desire for control within the neighborhood, I tried to empathize with her perspective. I proposed a potential compromise. If she would acknowledge my ownership, I would agree to explore any relevant concerns she had regarding property modifications or community standards moving forward. This offer was made in the hope of fostering goodwill and recognizing her role within the HOA without diminishing my rights as a homeowner. However, Karen dismissed the proposal outright, insisting that compliance with her interpretation of the regulations was non-negotiable. This response underscored the deep-seated tension between us. Her need for authority overshadowed any inclination toward collaboration. Detecting an impasse, I sought another mediation session facilitated by an impartial HOA member. During this meeting, we aimed to revisit our previous discussions but attempted to allow each party to voice their concerns without interruption. While I reiterated my commitment to abide by HOA rules, Karen took a hardline approach, emphasizing her frustrations instead of seeking common ground. The lack of willingness from both sides ultimately resulted in no immediate resolution. Despite this setback, I remained determined to further engage with other members of the community who expressed support for me, hoping they could help bridge gaps and foster understanding between Karen and myself. This journey became not only about defending my rights but also about encouraging a more cooperative environment within our neighborhood for everyone involved. Reflecting on this tumultuous experience, it is clear that the conflict over my inherited home extended beyond just property rights. It highlighted significant themes of personal relationships and community dynamics. At its core, this situation served as a reminder of how deeply intertwined our homes are with our identities and family legacies. The emotional weight of inheriting a family home carries with it not only cherished memories but also the responsibility to honor and protect that history against external challenges. Karen's claims revealed not only her desire for control but also the potential for misunderstandings within community structures like HOAs. This situation illuminated how easily perceptions can be distorted when individuals prioritize authority over collaboration. The division among neighbors underscored the need for open communication and empathy in resolving disputes, as well as the importance of understanding each other's perspectives. The lessons drawn from this confrontation extend to anyone facing similar conflicts. Engaging in dialogue, seeking compromise, and fostering a sense of community can help bridge gaps created by misunderstandings. Ultimately, I learned that standing up for one's rights does not negate the value of collaboration. Instead, it can lay the groundwork for stronger relationships within the community. As I move forward, I carry with me the strength gained from this experience and a renewed commitment to nurturing ties with my neighbors, aiming to contribute to a supportive environment that honors both individual ownership and collective harmony.